Today we're going to learn how to do passive. You probably remember back in German too when we did brochure projects and you were trying to write about historical sites and historical events, and I kept trying to head you off from saying things like Dresden was bombed, or the cathedral was built, or the emperor was crowned, and the reason that you couldn't say those things was because you didn't know the structure to do that with. So today we're going to learn that structure. On your Google handout, you have 6 example sentences. I would like you to read through them and mark in all of them the verb in orange and the subject in yellow. We'll do the first one together. Das Kaiserreich wurde 1871 von Otto von Bismarck gegründet. We can tell from the word order and the verb conjugation that das Kaiserreich is the subject. And by the verb, I mean the action verb, gegründet, not the helping verb. Go ahead and pause this video. When you come back, we'll go over the answers together. In the second example, Wilhelm I. wurde 1871 zum Kaiser gekrönt. Wilhelm I. is the subject, gekrönt is the verb. Thomas Buddenbrook wird zum Senator gewählt. Thomas Buddenbrook is the subject and gewählt is the verb. Christian Buddenbrook wird von seiner Frau Alina zum Irrenanstalt geschickt. Christian Buddenbrook is the subject, geschickt is the verb. Die Gruppe der Blaue Reiter, that whole thing is the subject, wurde 1911 geformt, there's your verb. And realistische Kunst wurde von den Expressionisten kritisiert. Realistische Kunst is the subject and kritisiert is the verb. If you just do that without thinking too hard about it, your knowledge of German sentence structure will lead you to choose those as the subjects and the verbs. But if you think about the definition we've used as the subject in previous classes, it's who or what is verbing. So in the first example, who or what is founding something? Is the Kaiserreich, the empire, founding something? I don't think so. Consider these two sentences, both of which are represented by the image. Der Arzt operiert den Patienten. The doctor operates on the patient. And der Patient wird von dem Arzt operiert. The patient is operated on by the doctor. Both of these sentences have the same meaning, that is, the people in scrubs are the ones with tools in their hands. But in the first one, the active sentence, the doctor is both the subject of the sentence and the one doing the action of the verb. In the second sentence, which is passive, the patient is the subject of the sentence. He's the one that the verb is conjugated to go with. But the person doing the action is still the doctor. All of these sentences are passive sentences. So looking back at that first example, who's the doctor? Who's the one who's actually doing the work, the action of the verb? That is Otto von Bismarck. You're going to mark the actual subject of these sentences in red. In some of them, that information is not given. If that's the case, you'll type it off to the side. Pause the video now and come back when you're ready to check the answers. In the next example, Wilhelm I. wurde 1871 zum Kaiser gekrönt. The sentence doesn't tell us who did that action. The Bundesrat crowned him Kaiser, I guess. Thomas Buddenbrook wird zum Senator gewählt. Again, the sentence doesn't give us the information about who is electing him. The people of Lübeck presumably did. Christian Buddenbrook wird von seiner Frau Alina zum Irrenanstalt geschickt. His wife Alina is the one sending him to the institution. Die Gruppe der Blaue Reiter wurde 1911 geformt. It's not in the sentence, but it was artist Vasily Kandinsky, Ukrainian artist. And then finally, realistische Kunst wurde von den Expressionisten kritisiert. The expressionists were the ones doing the criticizing in this context. So all of these are passive sentences. The 3 that did include who's doing the action are what we call personal passive, and the 3 that did not tell us who was doing the action are called impersonal passive, and we're going to learn how to do both. Inhaltlich, and you have these fill-in-the-blank sentences in your guided notes so that you can keep this information. Inhaltlich sind die gelben Elemente der Patient, aber grammatisch sind sie das Subjekt. wie in dem Beispiel, der Patient wird von dem Arzt operiert. Wir nennen das passiv. In einem Aktivsatz, in einem normalen Satz, macht das grammatische Subjekt, der Arzt, das, was das Verb beschreibt. Der Arzt operiert den Patienten. Thomas Mann schreibt Buddenbrooks. Nikolaus Otto erfindet den Viertaktmotor. In einem Aktivsatz, wie ihr schon wisst, ist das Zentrum eines Satzes das Verb. Die Antwort auf die Frage, wer verbt, who or what is verbing, ist das Subjekt. Ihr kennt das schon aus Deutsch 1, Deutsch 2. Das markieren wir mit dem Nominativfall. Die Antwort auf die Frage, wen oder was wird geverbt, whom or what is being verbed, ist das direkte Objekt und das markieren wir mit dem Akkusativfall. Aber wie bildet man einen Passivsatz? Ihr wisst schon, in einem Satz stimmt das Verb mit dem Subjekt in Person und Numerus überein. Wir nennen das Konjugation. Ein großes Publikum sieht regelmäßig Wagners Ringzyklus. Das ist ein Foto von der Oper, das Nibelungenlied von Richard Wagner. Und sieht in diesem Kontext ist konjugiert in der dritten Person Singular. Aber wie macht man das zu einem Passivsatz? In einem Passivsatz steht das inhaltliche direkte Objekt, der Patient, in der Stelle des grammatischen Subjekts. So, in dem Passiv wird das Objekt zum Subjekt. Das Objekt wird zum Subjekt. Das Verb wird zum Partizip und eine konjugierte Form von werden kommt in die zweite Stelle. So this is your basic form for an active sentence right here. The subject determines the conjugation of the verb, then you have the object and the rest of your sentence. For example, ein großes Publikum sieht regelmäßig Wagners Ringzyklus. To make it passive, you're going to take what used to be the object of this sentence, Wagners Ringzyklus, include a conjugated form of werden, here, wird. Then you'll have the subject and the rest of your sentence, and at the end will be the past participle of the verb. Regelmäßig von einem großen Publikum gesehen. So we have a two-part verb conjugation here. Wird, or a form of werden, comes second, and a past participle comes last. So this active sentence is, ein großes Publikum sieht regelmäßig Wagners Ringzyklus. A large audience regularly sees Wagner's Ring Cycle, that's his group of 3 operas lasting 17 hours. Or Wagners Ringzyklus wird regelmäßig von einem großen Publikum gesehen. In the passive version, Wagner's Ring Cycle is regularly seen by a large audience. Just as long as you make sure that in the active sentence and the passive sentence, they have the same meaning. Der Arzt operiert den Patienten and der Patient wird von dem Arzt operiert. Both have the meaning described in this picture. That is, never, ever, ever give your patient the scalpel. You want to make sure when you transform an active into a passive sentence that you keep the meaning the same. Zeitformen von dem Verb werden. Werden is an irregular verb. It is the helping verb in all of your passive sentences. In the present tense, werden conjugates like a stem-changing verb. Ich werde is a normal conjugation, but du wirst and es wird are irregular conjugations. Wir werden, ihr werdet, and sie werden are regular conjugations. The imperfect form of werden is wurde. You memorized that for verb quizzes last year, but just to make sure. The perfect form of werden is geworden, and the future tense of werden is wird werden. We are most commonly, for the passive, going to use the Präsens and the imperfect, and I will explain why here. But first, I want you to spend a little bit of time looking for past participles of some verbs that we'll use to talk about the Kaiserreich. In your Google Notes, there is a chart that has the English meanings and infinitive forms of some verbs, and there's a link to a verb conjugation website. Use the verb conjugation website to write down the past participles and the imperfect forms of the verbs that I've given you. Pause the video here and come back when you're done. The reason that I don't teach passive in German 2 or German 3 is because it uses werden, which you're used to using for the future tense, past participles, which you're used to using in the perfect tense, and can use the imperfect in the same sentence. So keeping those things separate in your head is going to be the important thing about remembering how to make a passive sentence. Look at these examples. To make present tense passive, you use the present tense of werden plus a past participle verb. For example, ein neuer Club wird dieses Jahr an OLHS gegründet. A new club is being founded this year at Liberty. The wird is in the present tense, meaning it's being founded. Same thing with ein Impfstoff gegen das Coronavirus wird entwickelt. A vaccine against coronavirus is being developed. Again, present tense form of werden gives us the present tense is being developed. To talk about the past, which you're going to be doing when you talk about the Kaiserreich, past tense passive, you'll use the imperfect form of werden and a past participle. For example, das Kaiserreich wurde 1871 gegründet. Wurde is in the past, meaning it was founded. So you have here past tense and past tense. That's the structure that you're going to be using in the following examples. So, the meaning of a passive sentence, die Bedeutung eines Passivsatzes, ist folgendes. In dem Passiv wechseln wir die semantischen Rollen von dem Subjekt und dem direkten Objekt. Das Beispiel war, ein großes Publikum ist das Subjekt, sieht regelmäßig Wagners Ringzyklus, das direkte Objekt, versus Wagners Ringzyklus, das ehemalige direkte Objekt, wird regelmäßig von einem großen Publikum gesehen. Persönliches und unpersönliches Passiv. This is the personal and impersonal passive that we talked about at the beginning. Personal passive takes what used to be the subject and makes it into a prepositional phrase using the preposition von, which is a dative preposition. So we took ein großes Publikum, which was previously our subject, and turned it into the object of the preposition von in the dative case, von einem großen Publikum. Impersonal passive essentially just gets rid of the subject. In an active sentence, we give that lack of information using the personal pronoun man. Man means one or somebody. For example, man kannte die Buddenbrooks für ihre erfolgreiche Firma. One knew the Buddenbrooks for their successful company. Or, was erfand man bevor der Telegraphie? What did one invent before the telegraph? In each of these, we don't know who exactly knew the Buddenbrooks or who exactly did this inventing because it's not really relevant to the content of the sentence. In the impersonal passive, whatever would be the subject is essentially just gone. Die Buddenbrooks wurden für ihre erfolgreiche Firma gekannt. Or was wurde bevor der Telegraphie erfunden? We'll sometimes sneakily do this as a way of hiding that information. If you've ever had to tell your mom, oh, by the way, mom, while you were out, the lamp was broken, and you sneakily leave out who broke the lamp, you're using the passive to do that. So next in your Google document, you have some exercises for the passive. In the first 5 sentences, I will give you one form or the other of the sentence, and you need to provide the other form. So if I give you the active, you rewrite it as passive. If I give you the passive, you rewrite it as active. In number 1, for example, Nikolaus Otto erfand 1986 den Viertaktmotor. Here, erfand is the imperfect form of the verb erfinden. So what I would be looking to do is change this to the Viertaktmotor was invented by Nikolaus Otto in 1886. Der Viertaktmotor wurde, that's the imperfect form of werden, 1886 von Nikolaus Otto erfunden. And you should have looked up that form of erfunden from your chart on the previous page. Go through and do numbers 2 through 5, pause the video, and come back here when you're ready to check your answers. In number 2, I gave you, Wagner wurde als der größte Komponist seiner Zeit angesehen. In this one, I don't tell you who saw him as the greatest composer of his time, so you needed to provide man as the impersonal subject. Man sah Wagner als der größte Komponist seiner Zeit. In number 3, man benutzte das Antitoxin für Tetanus im Ersten Weltkrieg. You have the impersonal subject man, which means you don't need to say who the antitoxin was used by in your passive sentence. Instead, you'll just say, das Antitoxin für Tetanus wurde im Ersten Weltkrieg benutzt. For number 4, I gave you, Buddenbrooks wurde 1901 von Thomas Mann geschrieben. You should have provided, Thomas Mann schrieb Buddenbrooks 1901. And in number 5, seine Mutter gebar Wassily Kandinsky im Jahr 1866. Wassily Kandinsky wurde im Jahr 1866 von seiner Mutter geboren. I think most people probably would even have left out von seiner Mutter. We typically just say that somebody was born in a given year and leave out the fact that their mother was the one doing all of the work at the time. For the next exercises, I've given you the English, sometimes in active and sometimes in passive. You need to provide the German for both the active and the passive. For example, in number 6, the Festspielhaus in Bayreuth was built for Wagner's music. This is a passive sentence. It was built, which means in the active sentence, I'm going to need to provide a subject, man baute das Festspielhaus in Bayreuth für Wagner's Musik. For the passive, I'll do more direct translation of the English into German. Das Festspielhaus in Bayreuth wurde für Wagner's Musik gebaut. Pause the video here and come back when you're ready to check numbers 7 through 10. Number 7, I gave you many European countries colonized Africa. That is an active sentence, so your active will look more like mine. Viele europäische Länder kolonisierten Afrika. Or Afrika wurde von vielen europäischen Ländern kolonisiert. Number 8, the gramophone was developed in 1887 by Emil Berliner. This is a passive sentence, which means you would have had to switch it around a little bit to come up with the active sentence. Emil Berliner entwickelte 1887 das Grammophon, whereas the passive will look more like my original. Das Grammophon wurde 1887 von Emil Berliner entwickelt. Number 9, Duke, the word is Graf, Leo von Caprivi was appointed chancellor after Bismarck. That's a passive sentence, so your active sentence will need to be transformed a little bit. Man ernannte Graf Leo von Caprivi zum Kanzler nach Bismarck. Someone appointed, presumably the Kaiser, appointed him. Whereas the passive sentence can be Graf Leo von Caprivi wurde zum Kanzler nach Bismarck ernannt. And then the last one, the audience, the word is das Publikum, criticized unrealistic expressionist art. Das Publikum kritisierte unrealistische expressionistische Kunst is an active sentence that looks like the original. The passive is unrealistische expressionistische Kunst wurde von dem Publikum kritisiert. So that's it. I hope that you find the passive useful in your writing as we continue talking about the Kaiserreich. See you next time.